The issue of foreign interference in our democracies and our institutions is extraordinarily serious, and that's why, as a government, we have always taken it incredibly seriously, including by building and creating new mechanisms to oversee and to ensure that we can counter that interference and demonstrate to Canadians that they can have confidence in their institutions. But on the specific question, as both myself and the NSIA stated last fall, we have no information on any federal candidates receiving money from China, and that continues to remain the case.
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, that is impossible, because not only did his own department prepare a briefing for him, which said that candidates had received funds, so did his own security committee, which said, and I'm quoting now from Global News, Global News also learned of an earlier high-level warning about clandestine funding of China's preferred candidates that came from a bipartisan panel of parliamentarians 2 months before the 2019 election. That so-called bipartisan panel is the Prime Minister's secret committee. They report to him. He knew. Why did he say the opposite of what he knew?
Yeah. Right Honourable Prime Minister.
As I said last fall, as the National Security and Intelligence Advisor stated, we have no information on federal candidates receiving money from China. That continues to be the case. In regards to the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians, Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to correct the honourable member and highlight that committee actually publishes reports to Parliament and to the public. That is something that is very, very clear. It's a committee of parliamentarians that get top secret clearance so they can look at everything our intelligence committees do and then report back to our Parliament.
Well, Leader of the Opposition.
Well, the Prime Minister stated another falsehood. He said it reports to public. Many of its findings are not reported to public. And second, Section 21 of the Act that creates that committee states that its reports go to the Prime Minister. They have to go to the Prime Minister. And he is the one that decides what becomes public thereafter. Therefore, he knew when that committee reported that candidates received money directed by the dictatorship in Beijing, and yet he has been and continues to say exactly the opposite. Why?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, parliamentarians can now go to the Library of Parliament or go online and see reports from the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians that were released publicly to them. The National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians, which the previous Conservative government opposed as an oversight body, actually allows parliamentarians to attain those top secret clearance levels to look into everything our intelligence agencies do and report back to Parliament, to me, to Canadians on how that's working.
Hear, hear.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Section 21 of the Act that creates that secret committee says, and I quote, each year the committee must submit to the Prime Minister a report of the reviews it conducted during the preceding years. In other words, he did receive the report. He should stop playing word games. Nobody needs to go to the library. What we need to do is get to the truth. The Prime Minister knew that his own security committee said Beijing had directed funds to candidates in preceding elections, and yet he continues to say exactly the opposite. Is he saying that the committee is lying?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to clear up the confusion around what the committee reports. Yes, the committee reports to me and to the government, but it also reports to parliamentarians and shares those reports. So this is the way many committees function in our government and will continue to. In regards to the issue of whether federal candidates received money from China, as I've stated many times, we have no information on that.
Leader of the Opposition.
We all agree the Prime Minister has seen the report. Well, this is what Global News says of the report. Global News has learned of an earlier high-level warning about clandestine funding of China's preferred candidates that came from a bipartisan panel of parliamentarians 2 months before the 2019 election. China gave money to its preferred candidates. The Prime Minister admits that the committee reported to him on this fact. Why does he continue to state the diametric opposite of the truth in his answers in this House of Commons.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I think we all understand how important it is that Canadians can have both confidence in our government's ability to counter foreign interference and confidence in the transparency and openness with which that happens. And that's why, Mr. Speaker, beyond the partisan to and fro that we necessarily see in this House, it is important to create an independent, unimpeachable special rapporteur who is going to be able to oversee the entire landscape around national security to make sure that the committees are doing their work, that the various bodies keep Canada safe.
Le député de Saint-Jean.
Monsieur le Président, ce n'est pas strictement la responsabilité du NPD de protéger notre système électoral, ni celle du Bloc, ni celle des conservateurs, puis clairement, ce n'est pas celle des libéraux. C'est notre responsabilité à tous, ensemble.
All of us who are responsible for protecting our system. The Prime Minister seems to not understand that the integrity of our democracy is threatened. We should all feel involved in finding a solution. All the parties are asking for a public and independent public inquiry. Why is the Prime Minister refusing to implement that? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, on the contrary, I am not refusing to implement that review. I know that Canadians need to be able to trust our democracy and our electoral system. And that is why I will be asking a special rapporteur to be appointed so that they can reassure Canadians outside of party lines that everything is being done right, and also to issue recommendations if necessary. The Honourable Member. Mr. Speaker, whatever the Prime Minister says, the electoral system doesn't belong to him and his party. This is not a liberal issue. This is a democratic issue. No one should have any doubt about the fact that everyone in this House has been elected legitimately without interference or trickery. And that means that we can't have secret meetings and special rapporteurs chosen by the Prime Minister. Why is the Prime Minister refusing to create a public and independent inquiry, which is what everyone is asking for? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I agree with the majority of what my...
J'ai vu qu'il applaudissait assez le Premier ministre que je vais le...
Well, the Prime Minister got so much applause that I'm going to let him start over. Mr. Speaker, in this House, we all agree about the fact that it's crucial to protect our electoral system and its institutions beyond partisanship. And that is why we will be choosing an independent figure to ensure that the mechanisms brought forward are right. Yes, we've heard from some experts who said that an inquiry is the right thing to do, but others have said that it's not the best way to move forward. And so as far as I'm concerned, I think that letting an independent special rapporteur, an expert, decide on this, I think that's the right decision for all of us. The Honourable Member for Burnaby South.
Every day, Canadians' confidence in our electoral system is being eroded. Recent reports indicate that at least 2 times the Prime Minister was advised that Chinese government officials transferred money to Canadian political candidates. This is serious, and Canadians start to wonder why it seems like the Prime Minister is hiding something. So why does the Prime Minister just launch a public inquiry and answer all those questions and give confidence to Canadians in our democracy?
Here, here. Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'm happy, first of all, to repeat that we have no information on federal candidates receiving money from China. But at the same time, Canadians are concerned about these various reports and allegations because there is ongoing attempts at interference by China and other countries, which is why we are putting forward an independent expert to look at the entire landscape around foreign interference and the tools we have and make a determination about how we can not just ensure that everything's being done to protect Canadians and democracy, but give Canadians confidence that everything will continue to be done.
The Honourable Member for Burnaby South.
Seems like the Prime Minister is more interested in protecting himself than protecting the electoral system. Parce que chaque jour, on a des nouvelles.
Every day, we are finding out more and more allegations. of foreign interference. It's undermining the confidence of the public. People are wondering why this secrecy. So why won't the Prime Minister launch a public inquiry? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, some experts are saying that we need a public inquiry and that it could find answers, but other very credible experts are also saying that a public inquiry would not be able to find the answers that will help Canadians regain trust. We know that Canadians need to trust that the right mechanisms are put in place, and that's why we're asking an independent expert to look into the situation and to bring forward the right mechanisms, whether it be a public inquiry, a legal process, or something else.
Global News reported 3 weeks before Canada's 2019 federal election, national security officials allegedly gave an urgent classified briefing to senior aides from the Prime Minister's office, warning them that one of their candidates was part of a, quote, Chinese foreign interference network, end quote. Can the Prime Minister tell us who that candidate was?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians well know that issues around national security are extremely important to be able to deal with, including to be able to be dealt with by elected officials and parliamentarians. This was a point of significant disagreement between the previous Harper government and our party in opposition, which is why we committed to creating a National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians, where parliamentarians from all parties would receive top secret clearances and be allowed to dig into everything national security agencies are doing. And that's exactly what we have allowed for.
Leader of the Opposition.
Has CSIS warned the Prime Minister, his staff, his party, or anyone else that any member of his current caucus or cabinet may be part of a foreign interference network, yes or no?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, as all members in this House well know, our intelligence agencies and officials work very hard every single day to keep Canadians, including Canadians of all different backgrounds, including all parliamentarians, safe from the impacts of foreign interference. Their work is carefully scrutinized by a number of oversight bodies, including NCIRA and NSICOP, that allow parliamentarians and experts to ensure that CSIS and other intelligence agencies are doing everything necessary to keep Canadians and our institutions safe.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Has CSIS warned the Prime Minister, his staff, members of his party, that members of his caucus or cabinet are part of a foreign interference network, yes or no?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Canadians well know that issues of national security and foreign interference can often be highly sensitive, which is why we have created bodies like NSICOP and NCIRA and other mechanisms to oversee the important and top secret work that our intelligence agencies do, to make sure that they're doing everything necessary to protect Canadians, to make sure that governments are held accountable for acting on information they could have received from our intelligence agencies. These are processes that we have put in place since 2015 that we will continue to work with.
Leader of the Opposition.
Yes or no?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we well know that issues of national security can be highly challenging to discuss as parliamentarians in the open floor of the House of Commons, which is why, over the objections of the former minister in the Harper government that objected to the creation of a National Security and Intelligence Oversight Committee, who's now the Leader of the Opposition, we went ahead and created a body that allows members of Parliament to get cleared to top secret levels so they can look into this question and all questions in a way that doesn't compromise national security.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Yes or no?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, issues around national security have deep implications for the safety and well-being of Canadians and those who serve to keep Canadians safe, sometimes in extraordinarily dangerous positions here and around the world. That's why we've created bodies that allow parliamentarians to get that top secret clearance so they can look directly at everything is done without putting at risk the brave women and men who serve this country to keep all Canadians safe.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
CSIS warned the Prime Minister's office 3 weeks before the 2019 election there was at least one candidate identified as implicated in a foreign interference network. Is that member in the Prime Minister's caucus or cabinet, yes or no?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we have created formal processes where parliamentarians from all parties, including from that member's own party, can get top secret clearances to look into matters impacting on national security and the safety of Canadians without putting at risk the women and men who serve in our intelligence communities here in Canada and around the world to be able to continue to do their jobs of keeping Canadians safe. And I know no one in this House wants to put anyone who serves this country at risk.
The Honourable Member for Laurentides-Labelle. Mr. Speaker, at a press conference on Monday, the Prime Minister listed the measures he's taken against foreign interference. In 2017, the National Security Committee of Parliamentarians. In 2018, legislation on elections financing. In 2019, a plan to protect democracy and a working group on threats to democracy. That's a list of everything that hasn't worked. We can all see that it didn't work. And now, the Prime Minister should listen to the opposition. What is he waiting for? To create a public and independent inquiry. The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, what I'm waiting for is for the Special Rapporteur, an independent expert who will be responsible and nonpartisan. I am waiting for them to evaluate our current measures and see what else we might have to do in order to not only ensure that the government does everything it can to protect our democracy and institutions, but also to ensure that Canadians can trust that everything is being done to protect our democracy, our elections, and our institutions. The Honourable Member. Mr. Speaker, we know that the Prime Minister wants to sweep this matter under the rug. We know that he doesn't want to talk about it anymore and that he wants to move on. But it's not that simple. And we need more than a secret committee and a special rapporteur who answers to the Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, this is a matter of the public's trust in our electoral system. Trifling with that is a very bad idea. I would invite the Prime Minister to listen to the opposition. Will he create a public and independent inquiry into foreign interference in our elections? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, my honourable colleague, her remarks are a bit troubling. She is suggesting that an independent expert is less equipped to protect our democracy than the opposition parties. We do not believe that any party is in a better position than another to protect the integrity of our institutions. And Canadians want us to depend on nonpartisan experts to make recommendations to ensure that everything is being done so that people can trust our processes.
Leader of the Opposition.
Which staff members in the Prime Minister's office did CSIS brief that there was a Liberal candidate implicated in a foreign interference network? Their names.
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I've addressed a number of questions, a number of answers along the lines of national security. But I do want to point out another issue that I know is preoccupying for Canadians. Just recently, Conservative Party MPs knowingly dined with a far-right German politician. Mr. Speaker, Christine Anderson and her party's far-right, xenophobic, anti-science, pro-Putin views are well known. His carefully crafted condemnation that neither he nor his MPs will repeat publicly just won't cut it. It's time he gave Canadians real answers and apologized.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Prime Minister's office was briefed 3 weeks before the 2019 election about a candidate that was implicated in a foreign interference network. Which members of the Prime Minister's staff were present for that briefing? Their names, please.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, it is extremely important that as a Parliament, that as parliamentary committees, that as a government, and that as Canadians, we look into the issue of foreign interference. It's why at Parliamentary Committee, the Ministers of Democratic Institutions and Foreign Affairs are scheduled to appear tomorrow. PROC has heard from Elections Canada, from the Director of CSIS, from the Chief of the CSE, the Deputy Commissioner of the RCMP, the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, and the Deputy Minister of International Trade. And to quote the member from Carleton, for hundreds of years, the principle of ministerial accountability has been paramount in the House and in committee. We agree.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, if he believes that he should be responsible, then he should answer the question. Which members of his staff were briefed by CSIS that one of his candidates was implicated in a foreign interference ring? And was Katie Telford, his chief of staff, among those briefed? Yes or no?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, Canadians can well see that there are important partisan and political considerations overlaying all these exchanges in the House, which is why Canadians want us to be able to step back as a country and say what actually happened, who actually was doing their job to protect against foreign interference, and was everyone doing the right things. That's why pulling forward an independent expert to oversee the work that is being done to ensure that everything that needed to be done was done properly, and that is continued to be done is going to be important, and that's what we're proposing.